Hello and welcome to the Bee Formless, a flow-driven VC podcast. I have Nuno Goncalves Pedro. I think I got the Gonzalez wrong, but I'll let you pronounce it properly, Nuno. Welcome to the show. I was trying so hard that I think I just absolutely messed it up.
It was very close, though. It was Goncalves Pedro. You just missed
Well,
the V, but
yes.
it's almost like Russian. Portuguese sometimes sounds a bit like Russian. And thank you for making the attempt.
Well, thank
It was very
you.
close.
Where are you originally from? But I should have asked that. Like, where were you born?
I was born in Lisbon,
Yeah,
Portugal.
I love Lisbon. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah, amazing
yeah.
city. Awesome. All right, well, let's get on into it. We've got a fair bit to unpack. So you're the founder and managing partner of Chameleon VC, which is investing globally at the early stage. I should have asked you how long you've been founder and managing partner, but you can share that with us. Previously, you founded and led Strive Capital and served as a senior expert with McKinsey. Wow, fascinating. You also are a podcast host, or you're a co-host with Tech Deficit Podcast. Love that. So you're probably going to be watching me and how I'm doing this podcast. It's always fun when I have
Yes,
a podcaster doing the show as
yes.
well, because I'm always like, oh, they're probably checking what I'm doing. That brings a system view to product culture and strategy. Tell us about your journey, how you became the founder and managing partner at Chameleon, and yeah, what got you into the VC space? Like originally, have you always played in this space? Like, yeah, tell us a bit about yourself.
Not really. I have a very, I think, uncommon, it seems very linear on paper, a lot of blue chips in there, like McKinsey, Deloitte, consulting, etc. But it was definitely not very clear that that would have been my path. I think I'm just innately curious and very right brain, left brain. So in some ways, I think being a venture capitalist and an entrepreneur in venture capital, to be more specific,
Yeah.
makes sense at the end of the day. Really, three very different stages in my life and my career. I'm a computer engineer by background, so I started in computer
Wow.
engineering. I actually developed systems that are still shockingly being used today. Maybe the sad state of affairs of IT around the world in some ways, or maybe I should be proud of the things that I developed.
We create
Became an
legacy.
engineering manager. Yes, it's sort of a legacy, yes, and it's being used by people every day. So that's fascinating. Became an engineering manager and a product manager over time. So I wasn't really a 10x developer, so to speak. So became more of a product manager. Second part of my career really as a growth operator, so around strategy, product, corporate development, and business development. That intermezzo with McKinsey after being their client, which is the wrong way around, I think.
Yeah.
You first work for McKinsey, then you go to a client, and this was the other way around. I was a client, and then I went to McKinsey. And as you mentioned, I became a senior expert and member of the Asia Pacific Technology, Media, and Telecom leadership team there. And then my last stage has really been fundamentally entrepreneurial, launching, two VC firms, Strive Capital and Chameleon. I feel being a venture capitalist is sort of at the nexus of all the skills that I developed over my career.
Mm.
The ability to analyze markets really quickly, to understand people and to relate to people, the ability to create systems, the ability to create hacks, right? As the opposed of systems, I always say the bottom up approach versus the top down approach
I love that.
are yes, and so that's sort of in a way the nexus of my career, sort of where everything was brought together, and now I'm a venture capitalist and an entrepreneur in venture capital.
Yeah, it's fascinating. So you've kind of had all these different experiences. So then you say it's like the nexus. So it's all then come together and almost like shaped into kind of what it is today.
Mm-hmm.
What's been the biggest, I guess, challenge or opportunity that you've found as part of
Yeah,
this nexus piece?
being a venture capitalist seems very sexy to everyone. It's like a really
Yeah.
interesting profession. Either you know what it is or you don't, right?
Or you pretend to
When
know
I'm
what
in
it
the
is.
correct, when I'm in the Bay Area, everyone knows what a venture capitalist is, and I'm being pitched all the time. When I'm in LA, maybe not so much. I split my time between the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, and LA. It is actually a very humbling kind of role because if you think about it, we make decisions within the context, in particular in early stage, of very long cycles, right? I mean, if we're operating a fund or managing a fund, typically these are 10-year funds, right? So
Wow.
you only know as good as you are or not at the end of 10 years, maybe sometimes even longer than 10 years. But at the same time, you're dealing with very real people, the founders and CEOs and the founding teams of companies that have issues all the time. I mean, they might have an issue later today. Someone might ping me as like, well, I'm having this problem, or I need to get rid of this person, or I want to hire that person, or I need to raise more money, or I'm feeling depressed. By the way, all of these things are real. All of these things have
I
happened to me. I have
know it's
people asking
fascinating.
me this.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
yeah,
so you're working, if you think about it, it's a little bit of a weird, a bit schizophrenic in some ways kind of world where we're being judged at very long time spans, but we're being also judged on very short time spans and interactions. And so it's very short term and very long term. And it's very, very humbling. You're only as good as your last fund, as I always say. And you might be riding an amazing wave, a company that's doing incredibly well for you on your portfolio that might implode later on, and vice versa. A company that might be almost dying, that becomes a superstar company and a rocket ship. So it's a very, very humbling role in that you only control as much as you sort of do in terms of picking the companies, helping the companies, and then deciding the right moment to liquidate your positions in those companies. But a lot of stuff happens in between that you have absolutely no control of. And so, in
yeah,
that sense, it makes it very humbling. That's why
yeah.
I really, really like it. As I said, sort of bring all my skills together. But at the same time, I'm always humbled by what I do and how I do it.
Yeah, because
Always learning.
it feels like to me, everyone I'm talking to, like it's almost like you're almost like pseudo psychologist, coach, like life coach, business coach, investor advisor, all of it, because you're dealing with like you say, at the end of the day, you're dealing with humans, right? And everyone has, and
Yes.
you brought up the depressed word, and when you're flying high and everything's going really well, you're feeling amazing. But then when and as a leader, as a founder, as a CEO, I get it. You're putting out spot fires every single day of the week. And it's just, it even comes to weekends. You've just got something, you've always got this constant,
Hmm.
you never sit still. It's that
Yes.
restlessness about you. And then the role you play within it. What skill do you think you've had to dial up the most since coming into this
Mm.
world of your skills?
Uh, I think I'm not sure you would count it as a skill or not, but or if you'd count it as sort of a good habit to have or a good element to have in your panoply of toolkit, but just patience. I'm a very impatient person, and I've developed all my career around that impatience, the intensity of getting stuff done. And you have to be very patient at times and very open as well around people, around their issues, around how they come to you. As you said, we sometimes become psychologists to the founders we invest in, but that's not granted, right? It's not given to us. We don't have the right. The rights that we are given are the rights that are given by the agreements that we sign with these people once we give them money. That's the only rights we really have. Everything else is sort of a dance, right? It's, do you want my help? And what do you want my help on? And my experience, normally the help starts with actually very specific things, either knowledge of the industry or strategy or specific functional areas around business development, sales, operations, etc. And only if there's really a lot of trust, we go into that level of psychology, right? This
Yeah.
is what I'm struggling with. This is what my mindset's happening, or what's happening in my mindset right now. And then going into people's lives, right? I mean, this is, you know, a partnership as well, right? When you invest in a company, you're together, you're going to be working with that company maybe for 7, 8, 9, 10 years. I've been on a board of directors now for 12 years, which is shocking, right?
Wow. That's
And
huge.
somehow they don't kick me out of the board and the company's still around. And it's uncommon, right? That you stay so long on a board of directors, but some of these partnerships do last that long. They last very, very long. So you have to have the patience to deal with things, right? Where at the same time you have to act upon issues that may arise that might lead to the death of the company, right? Which you obviously want to avoid at all costs, right? And so, how do you deal with that? Again, this sort of schizophrenic kind of multiple personality disorder element of being a venture capitalist. How do you deal with all these things at the same time? How one thing you're talking about, because we have to deal with the energy of others all the time, other founders. How do we bring our own energy to the table, right?
I
Because
was
I'm
about to
like,
say that.
I might be pissed off, right?
Or you might be not feeling
I
great.
might,
Yeah.
I might not be feeling great. Might be having a meeting with a founder who, for some reason, decides to be disrespectful to me. It doesn't happen very often, but could
Yeah.
be
It can.
disrespectful to me, or or dealing with his or her own problems. And how do I bring myself to the table? And that's very, very critical. How do you bring yourself to the table? How do you deal with stuff? And I'm not saying I'm perfect at everything. It's work in progress all the time. As I said, it's
That's
always very
good.
humbling. It's always a learning curve. Yeah.
We're all work in progress. I think the patience things
Hmm.
for me is the hardest part. Like I'm
Hmm.
very, I like things done like this. Like, I'm one of those, and I think that is it's good at times. Like it's good to be like on, and you get shit done basically. You can see strategically where something's going, and you know where it's going. And when it's not going as quickly or as kind of, as strategically as you want it to go, you have this ability to just like boom, 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 boom. But you can't do it for others, and you can't do it all. And I think
Mhm.
that I always found that, and still do now, like, like you say, that work in progress piece, patience is a virtue. And, quite often we are just going like full tilt, and we often then lose sight of actually what might be something we wouldn't have noticed if we hadn't have slowed down. And
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
really realizing that now, and that's been a big learning curve for me. Is that something that, like, how do you, if you're not a patient person, how have you created patience given the world you're in? Because it does feel like, from the outside in, it does feel like it is, like you say, it's this sexy cutthroat, like, and yet
Yeah.
it's, you've got a short game and a long game. That patience piece in the short game, it probably doesn't, you probably don't really have much
Yeah.
patience, but in the long game, you need heaps of it.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. One, without going too much to that front, but I'm Catholic. I'm a practicing Catholic, and so, I think we should all have sort of North Stars, be it in the form of mentors or family
Yeah.
members that really have helped you through it. If you're religious in any way or spiritual in any way, obviously there's other elements of
Yeah.
that North Star, which might be God or your interpretation of God or whatever it is.
Universe.
For
Yeah.
me, it's very simple. I'm Catholic, so it's the Trinity, right? And so Jesus is a little bit at the center of what I do. It's like, how would he behave if he was in the same
Yeah.
situation? And honestly, that's very difficult in a work environment, right? Because you're like, to your point, this is about making money for people, and so how do you deal with that? But having that as sort of your North Star has been very helpful to me in sort of centering myself, and that patience is a core element of being like that. As a little bit of a pose of sort of bad pride, as I call it. A lot of people now think pride is a good thing, but there's bad pride in Portuguese and Spanish. There's this word called soberba, which is bad pride, which is when you're doing things just because you think you're above the other people, or because you want sort of to impinge your own right to be sort of godlike in some ways. But if I move to sort of more less spiritual, less religious pieces, it's about working on it really every day, right? I mean, it's like a pro athlete, right? If you want to be really good at your job, you have to practice it all the time. And that means you have to practice even in situations that have nothing to do with your job, right? Will I be impatient in traffic? That's the one I'm struggling still the most. I'm an aggressive driver. It's one of my hobbies. I'm a race car driver, and it's like people in California, honestly, they don't know how to drive. And in Southern California, they're too aggressive. In Northern California, they're not paying attention. And so working on patience in that raw kind of resort where your emotions are very vivid when you're driving your car has been sort of one of my things, right? Being patient with people that are in service, right? Being gentle to them, asking them how is their day going, right? Besides yourself, helping them in their stuff, not judging them, So applying patience. So where you have a deficit, apply it in everything in your life, because that will get you to a point where it's natural. What you want to have a habit being formed, right? You want to have a habit that gets formed. And the only way to create habits is through a lot of practice.
Oh, I love
And maybe
that.
you get to practice in your job, but you also get to practice it in every day. You're about to park your car, someone takes your spot. How do you deal with that, right? You get pissed off, unhappy, or you accept it, right? It's like, okay, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to park here. I'm going to park somewhere else, right?
Yeah, I
And
think it's,
so how do you deal with that?
yeah, I agree. And I think there's a lot of control in this too. Like, the more we try and control things, like we want to get to the destination. We want the outcome the way we want it. And so, like, patience can fall out the window. We could talk about this forever, right? But I'm gonna switch it up in minutes. But
But if
control
it,
is,
but if I say something about control, because I think B, you identified something that's pretty critical. We all want to have control, and the more intense and the more driven we are, we want to have more control. But if we just sat down and did a little bit of the math of how much of our day we controlled and how much was controlled by other people, circumstances, devices, other things, we would easily come to the conclusion that we controlled very little
that's exactly
in
the
the day.
point
I
I wanted
always
to make.
say probably
Yes.
5%, right?
Yeah,
So why are we
100%.
going nuts about stuff we absolutely have no control about, right?
It's
And that's
exactly
very
right.
difficult to let go.
Yeah, it is. But then, like the car park analogy, like when you are driving into a car park and you're like, "Arr," and you're just like, okay, I'm gonna get a car park. Next thing you know, there's a car park. Like it always works out
Yes.
too. I think at the end of the day, like yes, the stuff happens, but yeah, we have very little control. Tell me, what do you? If you're obviously you're investing globally at the early stage. What are you seeing in terms of trends in market? What's going on at the moment? Like I'm having various conversations around,
Hmm.
the VC, kind of as it's in its own right as a sector. And a lot of people are, saying it hasn't changed. Others are saying it needs to change. It's at a really interesting point in time. You've got the founder, you've got the investor, then you've got these hybrids that are founders, now investors. It sounds like a
Yeah.
really interesting ecosystem with a lot of different points of view at this point in time. What's your view on it all?
I'll make 3 points. One is sort of the more macro point. I'll leave that to the end. The first one more around startups, and then the second
Yeah,
one more around VCs. On startups, it's AI's time, right? So we're
yeah,
in a cycle, just to be clear. It is a bubble. So most of these companies are going to fail miserably. There's going to be a lot of money lost. But we're going to have the next category definition plays in the market. There's going to be the next big plays coming out of this. And therefore, the cycle matters a lot. And it matters a lot because it affects broad society, it affects consumers, it affects businesses, enterprises, etc. But I feel we are just in the middle of that. And so right now, the haves and have-nots is either you're AI, you're sort of distinctive, or you're not. And if you're AI, you're sort of distinctive, you raise whatever at whatever valuation with whatever proof points. If you're not, then it's much more difficult for you to raise because there's a lot of money being put to that side. Money is not infinite, right, in venture capital. And so therefore, you have to have a story that's much, much stronger probably than at any other point in time. This, I think, will produce two really good things. You'll have amazing category defining companies in AI, and you'll have incredibly resilient companies that will be category winners that are not necessarily AI or AI first, right? So I think that's the first thing that I'm
interesting.
observing. The second thing that I'm observing is really around venture capital. I feel venture capital has gone through a cycle that has not been always positive, but in general has been quite positive, but with very little innovation around the core of what venture capital is. And if you think
Yeah,
about it, it's really about great sourcing of deals, getting into those deals through great due diligence, and then sort of hopefully liquidating them at the right time. And if you look at the industry has done almost no innovation. The only innovation you could probably point
yes.
me to since World War II is the creation of branded firms, right? Like the Andreessen Horowitz of the world, to a certain extent Sequoia, et cetera, et cetera. And so now we're getting into a world where there's a huge brand arbitrage, so to speak, which is creating these mega funds in venture capital that to me don't make much sense as venture capital funds. I do think there's a limit on the size of a fund in venture capital, and a 10 billion, $20 billion fund cannot possibly be venture capital. It doesn't work in terms of fund construction, portfolio construction, and returns. And on the other side, you have a lot of people, a lot of single general partner firms, a lot of smaller firms that are still coming into the market, and many that I think will disappear. So I think we're going to have a huge reset of, again, another haves and have nots where the smaller firms that sort of withstand the test of time and go to the next level will be very strong. And then you have the big firms that, will hopefully do okay. We'll see how some of them will behave with 10 to $20 billion funds. And that's a little bit the current arena that we're in. And if you're not dramatically innovative, if you're not dramatically strong, for example, we at Chameleon use technology that we build in-house to differentiate around the deal sourcing, due diligence, picking stage, and liquidation, which is
Yeah.
a very unique play. We're not data-driven. We're the next thing. We're quant tech-driven. And if you don't have that way of distinguishing yourselves in the market and creating better returns for your limited partners, then I think it will be very difficult for you to win. The last piece is macro. And macro for me is fascinating because I don't know all the answers, but I know a lot of the problems. Because of AI, if we talk in particular around the business environment and the employment environment, I think it would be very difficult for someone coming out of college, straight up undergrad, to get a meaningful job. It's going to be tougher and tougher.
Hmm.
And the problem is, the junior help you need, you probably don't really need it. And so if you're a mid-level or senior level person, you sort of can get away with a lot of individual contribution kind of stuff, aided and augmented by AI tools. And then I'm like, why do I need this junior developer now? Why do I
Yeah.
need whatever? It's one of the areas the largest unemployment right now in the US is computer science and computer engineering, or some positions in computer science and computer engineering, which we never thought we would ever say, right? Now, I think that will drive people that are coming out of college to figure out what's next for them and how do they get that apprenticeship that comes with the first 3 or 4 years of getting into your job is something that is very interesting. I think actually we'll have more and more micro companies, not just startups, but micro companies, small businesses, medium business, people doing stuff from the ground up because they too have access to AI. So
Yeah.
although they don't have the social interaction and the management and the leadership, they have access to tools that allow them to build businesses as well. So I think that's going to be really, really interesting. And as a venture capitalist, obviously, this is a parochial interest because if there's more and more startups, there's more and more companies, you can obviously have a lot more to pick from and you have a lot more innovation coming into the market. But that part is very, very interesting. A lot of people only talk about the negative side of it, like, young people won't have opportunities. I'm like, maybe they'll just leapfrog, right? Because they'll start businesses themselves and ran into the market directly, right? With no protection, right? There's no
Yeah.
managers, no nothing, right? So it's their take the blunt and they learn, right? So there's a lot of interesting things I think going on. So I'm a little bit more hopeful and a little bit more positive about
Yeah,
that dynamic.
it's interesting that, and I loved all of that. Thank you so much for sharing that. It was super insightful and, just really refreshing to hear. The one thing one of the points that you made around this meaningful, kids coming out of graduating at college, university over here, like looking for those meaningful or finding those meaningful roles. I think we've got these younger generations that are up and coming and they're looking at us. I mean, I'm 48 and they look at you and go like, gosh, you've worked your butt off. Like you worked constantly. And yet I'm choosing not to do that. I want more purpose in my life. I want to, I was talking to someone the other day about, have you heard about the 34-year-old Prime Minister in Finland who's turned
Yes.
changed it to 4 day week, 6 hours a day because health is wealth as well. Like it's all like for wealth, but productivity is not going to change. So I find that sort of, she's 34, so she's not coming just out of college, right? But I'm excited to see what comes up when you talk about bottom up and versus top down. I'm excited to see what's going to come up, in the generations and what they're going to
Mhm.
introduce because, we still need critical thinking, we need the innovation, we need creativity. If you look at the roles between now and 2030 that come from human potentials, you talked about resilience earlier. I talk about it in an anti-fragility terms in terms of that
Mhm.
ability to bounce forward. I think seeing that those sort of small businesses, startups coming up where they're going to have a completely different view on what business could look like and the possibility of it. When you talk about the cycle we're in, or from a VC in particular space, or well, not just VC, I think that we're in a really interesting cycle, full stop. And who knows what is going to look like in 10 years time from today.
Mhm.
There will be
Mhm.
some that don't survive and others that, yeah. So I really do think it is an interesting time to be not standing still and having that ability to think differently and, look at everything and not kind of be wedded to what you've always done. Like, do you think that that's part of this as well in terms of like, don't want to just blow it all up, right? But there's this need you talked about at the start about you've got this deep curiosity. We can't just have our blinkers on. It's got to be constantly looking because AI is coming at us at a rate of knots. Like, it's for me,
Yeah.
I think that's super important.
Mhm. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I've got a question for you. And when you booked in for the pod, I always ask everybody what's one unique insight, lived experience that they would like to share when it comes to, and in this instance, when it comes to life, leadership, or investing.
Mhm.
What would be something that comes to mind or that you would like to share?
I think the most important characteristic that I found that is probably not very obvious in today's times, in particular with all the noise going on and with all the things that are going on in our world, geopolitically, technologically, etc., is intellectual honesty. I think it's dramatically underrated, but I think it's a core skill that anyone should develop very early on. And what I mean by that is not that you don't have strong convictions and strong opinions, but it's that you have the ability. to let go of those opinions and those convictions if you have proof otherwise, if there's data, if there's argumentation that convinces us to go the other way. And so this is not flip-flopping. It's just have the mental flexibility to switch your perspective and your convictions over time. I think that's incredibly powerful. Others might call it openness. I think being open to other people, being open to opinions and to dialogue is a part of that process. It's the part of what leads to intellectual honesty. But intellectual honesty for me is probably one of the most underrated core characteristics of success in today's world.
I knew you'd give me a great answer. Like I had no one said intellectual honesty at the moment. I told you there's going to be a book
Hmm.
or something that comes out of this. Couple of last questions for you. What, in terms of early stage, a few people have also talked about it's always around like when you're like looking at early stage, investing, etc.
Hmm.
It's not about the product, it's about the person. What's
Hmm.
your point of view on that? Like that.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Abby.
No, I was just going to say to you, yeah, and I'll let you answer it, but it was just literally, yeah, they've said it's, it's all around this, it's like the person, have they got what it takes?
Yeah,
Like, what's your view versus the product? Yeah.
I, I, I've been calling BS on that for a couple of decade and a half. So since
Yeah,
I've been in
okay.
venture capital for 15 years, obviously it is about the people. It's
Yeah.
about the grit and resilience of the founders, the skills that they have that they bring to the table, the angles that they bring to everything they do around leadership and management of the team. Their own ability to contribute as individual contributors very early on is pretty vital, right? That they're great at how they actually work. They're not just managing, they're building stuff themselves. So all of that's true. I'm not saying that's not true, but there's other aspects, right, of what makes a company great. There's a very obvious aspect. We go back to how much control do you have on stuff. There's something called a market, right? And the market exists, right? Irrespective of the company existing, the market exists. And
Absolutely.
so, observing the market, understanding how good or bad of a market is, I think it is in the purview of venture capital firms, even at early stages, even if the company had no product in the market, you can still observe markets. Is this a good market? Is this a tailwind market, a headwind market? And I've met incredible founders. Markets win, right? So,
Mm.
there's been some incredible founders that then do the master of all pivots and they change markets, right? But that's a different thing, right? It's difficult to invest in a company that you're anticipating is going to change market. I mean, what does that mean? But markets, I think, are something that's very prime for you to observe. And then on top of it, companies might have launched something. They might be very early in terms of proof of concept. They might be in the market already. Even at early stage investing, we do Series Seed and Series A investing. You have to observe their numbers. Do they have early signals of product market fit? And you need to sort of cheat a little bit. You have to see the indications that they're
Yeah.
getting there, or they may already attain something. And product market fit is dynamic, right? So that's sort of the first layer of product market fit ahead of others. So I sort of call BS on the whole. It's only the team. I was like, there's a lot of other things you can make calls on. Distinctive technology, product market fit, cheat as I call it, markets for sure in any circumstance, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, okay. No, it's good to know. I thought you might come out with that and say, yeah, because it's an interesting one because you need a product and the market.
It
And
is a people business, just to be clear. So just people don't take, oh, that guy is
no,
like
no,
an
no, I get it.
analytical whatever, but
Yeah.
it's more than that. Yes.
Well, I see that based on everything all your experiences, it's holistic. It's a whole approach, right, to it, and you need it all. Last question for you, race car driver. So I love like into race car driving, but you said to me you've also or maybe did I get that wrong? That you did say you like race
I
car
am.
driving.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah. It's my hobby. I have a racing license. I actually
that's right.
raced
Your hobby.
in tracks, not on the street. I
In
raced on
tracks. No,
tracks.
no, no,
Yeah,
I know that. Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And then
yeah.
but then we were talking pre-show and you were also talking about I was talking about my puppy and you were talking about how worked for you gave back. You gave back and you worked in a
Hmm.
dog
Hmm.
place. What do you like in terms of my final question for you is how do you keep your cup full? Because you sound like you're an all or nothing in terms of intensity, but then you've got this a unique ability. You talked about your faith and the ability to give back. What do you do though to ensure that your cup's full, given what you're doing in business?
Yes, I mean, I ensure my cup is full by doing things that I enjoy and love. It's not always possible. There's many things that you end up having to do that are not necessarily enjoyable, even in your spare time, even when it's not professional. And that's part of creating even that patience that we were talking about earlier. I think what's more difficult is rather than keeping the cup full because there's so many things going on, it's the ability to say no to things that you don't want to do. Maybe you would like to do, but you just don't have the time or capacity to do, or maybe you can't create quite the value that is warranted by that activity versus the time you're going to spend on it. And we actually do need to rest, right? I mean, we're sort of called upon resting as
Yes.
well
Yeah,
and having a little bit of rest and chill. And
yeah.
so resting doesn't mean not doing anything. It might mean that you do something else, go to the gym, do some exercise, go
Infrared.
swimming, whatever it is. Race cars for me is sort of resting. It doesn't seem like a very restful activity, but I get to states that are very much in flow in some ways at times. That's at least what I aim for. But the saying no piece I feel is the most difficult part, which is like I'm sorry, but I don't have time for this, and I'm not being difficult, or it's not like I'm always busy, but I do need to sort of save my time for the things that I believe are more important to me, including rest.
Yeah, I love it.
And that's how I think about it.
With 1 minute to go, two things there. I call it active recovery, so that like you can still be active, but you're recovering. So when you're thinking about your race car driving, it's that active recovery piece, right? Because
Yeah.
you're giving yourself some time, but you're resetting, you're reflecting, and yeah, you're recharging. So that for me is super important. And obviously sleep, like absolutely, we need the sleep and the ability.
I can assure you, B, when you're driving a car and racing other people on a track for position, there's very few other things on your mind at that point in time.
Well, so then you are in
That's I
flow.
can assure you.
You're completely effortless, right? And then the other part about saying no is the ability. Well, I learned this ages ago, right? Well, not ages ago, more recently, a few years ago, that rather than saying sorry, I can't make it, it's like I would love to attend, but in this instance, I'm unable to because the minute you say sorry it's almost like you feel
Yeah.
like you're letting someone down. So I love that little switch up as well because it just helps me when I'm like, I've got too much on and I'm like, I just can't do this. And then I'm just like, no,
Yes.
setting those boundaries. But Nino, how do we find out more about you? Because it's been super insightful. How
Yeah.
do we find out more about Chameleon? It's been an absolute, joy talking to
Well, you can Google my name. You can go to Chameleon with the alternate spelling, so MAE in the middle, .vc, which is our website. You can go to Tech
podcast.
Deciphered. The website is decipheredshow.com. Deciphered, so already
Yep.
deciphered, show.com. And that's the best places to find me. I mean, if you want to connect and you listen to the show, feel free to ping me on LinkedIn and just put a little bit of a note on it, and we'll figure out how to best connect.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
It's been a real joy talking to you. I'm going to let you get back to the rest of your Tuesday afternoon slash heading into the evening. And thank you.
Thank you, B.
Thanks.